I think the idea that, oh, well, there's like product market fit, like we do need to pay attention to the market, did bleed over then to the second company, which we started to ideate and think about, okay, what do we really want to build?
On today's episode of Inside the Silicon Mind, we're excited to welcome Clement Pang. Clement is a serial entrepreneur and software engineer with over 15 years in tech, known for co-founding Wavefront, which VMware acquired for $400 million, and Lavana Labs, where he built AI learning companions to transform children's literacy. He began his career at Google, leading fraud and abuse infrastructure to protect billions of users, and later helped build GLMX, a money market trading platform now processing over $1 trillion daily. Clement is an entrepreneur in residence at Sutter Hill Ventures, exploring new ventures at the intersection of AI, data, and human impact. In this episode, we dive into Clement's journey through startups, AI, and the future of building impactful technology at scale.
At what point did you know, whether it's the university, whether it's being at Google, at what point did you know I'm going to be a founder? I'm going to be, or at least start thinking about being part of a startup?
I think when I started in my first company,
Clement, I'm curious, how has AI changed what it means to be a founder today?
well, it's changed so many things, right? Like there is the how you build stuff, how you ideate about, product, how you even decide what to build these days, right? Because I think there's always this joke, like, one of the foundation model companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, like they're just so close to like the adjacent GPT wrappers. So you want to be making sure like you're not building something that they could just release like the next day, right? And just replace your company. But in terms of ideation, right? Like I'm in the car, I'm chatting with like ChatGPT and thinking about, okay, so like I want to learn about like thorium reactors because I want to understand like how they work. And they would just like explain to me like I'm 5, right? Like, and that's helped me with so many things, right? Because I just want to understand like, hey, why is this a thing? Why is this company a thing? Why do people use it? Like, how this file format works and why are companies buying this and how are they selling? You just learn so much about that. And then finally, of course, as somebody who builds, like writes code, right? Like, Cloud Code has just changed, kind of just everything, right? Yep. Just you feel like, you have so many junior devs, right? Or even potentially senior devs as they are becoming more intelligent that are helping you constantly, right? So just how can you run multiple agents in parallel doing things? And then, in the past, like maybe you don't write all the unit tests and now there's no excuse that you have to write all the unit tests, like it's all covered, right? And so, yeah, it's just changed, I think, how you would build, what you would build, and everything in between.
I'm guessing as far as like a shift in the industry, is this the first big change since when? Since cloud, since mobile?
I think since cloud, yeah. Started my first company, we're racking stuff in Equinix, right? And the second company is already in AWS. I think that was a big change because you're not, well, it used to be fun because I guess you could go to the data center and you could see their like giant flywheel, like power backups. But now it's just something you don't even know where it is. Like it's probably in Oregon somewhere, right? But now it's like it's another fundamental shift. I think the first shift to cloud allowed us to just play with stuff, right? Nowadays, even like it's impacting our own lives, right? I think about whether I should buy a GPU or like, maybe now I could just, go to one of the SaaS services and do that. So that shift, of course, like I think has come and stayed. But I think AI is just another step function where everything is like, like careers are being altered as we speak, right?
It's interesting. Like, the way I look at it from an industry standpoint, is it similar to the internet age as far as like the big shift that's happening? From more from like you need to think about AI. Like when the internet came around, it was everyone needs to become an internet company. Yeah, right.
I think I would think of it as, is it a disruptor that is so big that a new player could completely unseat a traditional entrenched player? And I think the advent of the computer, right? Like, so if you were to, get on the bandwagon early enough, like you could build something better than companies that did not have computers, companies that did not operate on the internet as an e-commerce store, like you could build something Amazon, right? Like to do that. And I think AI now has the same effect. I think a lot of existing legacy companies, they would have so much processes, so much code base, so much, cruft to deal with that. Another company could come in and, rethink the whole process of, I don't know, like booking airline tickets, right? That's commonly cited. And you could build something brand new and it could be better. And suddenly, like, they have a real major problem.
And you're in that ideation phase right now. You're thinking about what's next and you're building this this is an interesting time because when you think about where you are today, you're a serial entrepreneur. You've done this many times over, and we'll get to that. But as far as the funding piece and starting a company, the size of the company, how many engineers do you need today versus what you needed before? What is the cost to building a startup today versus before? What are the most significant changes you're seeing right now?
Well, certainly, I think there is this, as I just said, like there's this feeling that you could build so much, right, with agents helping you to do that, right? So are you going to hire that many junior devs and senior devs? But then you also think like, oh, but then, what happens to the industry, like, or even your company, right? Because you play it a couple of years down, right? You really do want people, because it's kind of cool to be running agents for a while, but then you'll be like, okay, so I'll run agents for like customer support. I'm going to run agents for like my DevOps, my ops, my, everything. And then at some point, right, well, that also is, takes on a toll, right? So maybe you have some meta agent that's managing all of that, right? But it becomes this question of like, okay, if I really truly built this and it is just a one-man army, like I always have this quote from all the companies I've been at, which is like people tell me like, there's the Clement run by a bus problem, like in many of the places I've been at. And now you're like concentrating that risk even further, right? Because nobody really knows what's going on. Like again, maybe at some point there's this meta agentic things that even if you're like stepping away completely, like the company still runs, but we're not there yet even with coding. So let alone like you could just run marketing, with an agentic thing, right? So
as far as like the role of a software engineer, how is that going to look in the coming years?
Yeah, I think recently someone told me a joke, and I was like, oh, we don't need like developers anymore. We just need people who knows exactly how to tell the computer to do like the things that we want it to do, right? Which, yeah, so I think like developers probably will still be around, but it's kind of like, okay, we don't program in assembly. We don't program, not most people don't program that low level these days, right? So, but I think there's another level of abstraction. Of course, it opens up software development to like product managers and to the designers. But I think even for engineers, like it's the at least the agents of these days, like they get very eager to like just solve your problem, right, without thinking too much about like how is it going to interoperate with existing systems. Are you going to build it in a way that you could do like the next 20 things you want to do with it, because you just give it a single prompt, like I need just this little piece of software. It's going to just maybe take the path of least resistance and build it for you. So developers are still there just trying to think a little bit ahead, right, of like, hey, can I ask more questions? Because you'd have a little bit more of the business sense of what are you going to do? What is the next 20 things you want to do? And so you may prompt it better, or when it's building. I think right now what I often have to do is, just go into a planning phase with the AI and be like, don't write any code, right? Like just let me ideate with you for a little bit, write out design docs and then go attempt the work. And I think that might be just, software developers just are ideation kind of partners, and then the person that's certainly writing the unit tests and the commit messages, like that's the AI. But then you're monitoring like the actual like the code that is being written and stopping it and pausing it at times and then giving additional suggestions. So I think it's a elevated plane of work, I think. Yeah.
And Clement, when you think about the scope of AI today as a new piece of technology that everyone is playing with and building new companies, is it now harder or easier to start companies?
I think it's easier to start companies, but well, it's harder to get funding. So it's like, is it easy to start a company that stands the test of time?
Right.
I think now it's hard because you really could have somebody who looks. I mean, you could probably just go into any of the coding help and just say like, write me this, right? Write me this thing that I see on the App Store. And it'll probably get you like maybe 80% of the way. Like so. Right. So you always have somebody who could be competing with you, and yeah. So but easy because you have things like Vercel, you have things like serverless like databases, you have clouds, you have of course Lovable and Bolt if you want to go like completely to agentic and just prompt based product work. But I think it is getting easier. But I think the problem is once you get to that stage, then what is really good software like starts to stand out, right? Because I've gone through my companies where it's infrastructure companies, right? A lot of it is you need to have really good algorithms, right? You need to have very good architecture design, scalability, resiliency, and all that kind of stuff, right? And so those are still requirements, right? And to the degree that you could you're not just vibing all of this,
Sure.
right? Where you actually know what the best practices are and whatnot. I think those companies will probably stand out a bit more. I feel because it's again like is this like zero shot situation where you're just typing something and it goes off and does something, like oftentimes means it will just build your company maybe on shaky foundation. It allows you to build it quickly, but then maybe you then ask the agent to come back and be like, okay, let me build it like it would be Google scale. But then does it know how to come back and do all of that work and refactor and do all the migration and all that kind of stuff? Right? Like, so is it better than at that point to build it right the first time? So it's easy, but how do you build something
Sure.
that's enduring that really could scale and also like differentiable, right? So is there actual IP, actual algorithms, actual new insights that you're bringing to a particular problem? I think that's still going to be there.
One phrase I hear a lot nowadays is this whole concept of it, as you said earlier on, a wraparound ChatGPT. And the risk is, at what point does ChatGPT completely take over and see what's working? And do you see that as like a real risk right now in the market? Are there a lot of companies doing this, and are they playing quite a...
Yeah, I think so. I some companies I am familiar with it even, right? Like that they started, like let's use Claude, right? Like it was more like a ChatGPT clone in the very beginning, and people noticed that it was really good at coding, right? So I think maybe 2 years ago I was pasting actual problems into ChatGPT and doing like cut and paste and all that kind of stuff, right? And then Claude came along and be like, ooh, MCP is really cool. So I use MCP, just give it terminal access and do that. And then of course, like Anthropic probably saw that, hey, why don't we just even own that space and just make Claude code a thing, right? But I'm sure enough companies, right, whether it's like the Cursor or the Windsurf, right, and other companies who saw that the models are really good at coding, built a product out of it, now realizing that actually the models that they're using or that they may be fine-tuning or at least, calling millions of times a second, right, is actually going to compete with them, and you're actually giving them the training data, right? Sure. So whether they use it or not, but that's a real issue, right? Because these are like billion-dollar businesses, right? And so if you're so adjacent to the textual completion problem, then you might be at risk.
Are we at a point now in the industry where we know which companies own the application layer and really own the market from an AI standpoint?
I don't think so. Yeah. So I use like ChatGPT to plan travel, right? But you understand like text chat only gets you so far, because if you're traveling at an airport, right, like you're not going to scroll your text and be like, when did I talk to, well, you could ask it again, like, when's my flight, blah, blah, blah. But it's probably easier if they have a UX that actually tells you like, hey, this is, flight information in some sort of a, like Flighty, right, which is a great app, right, that actually, shows you that information, surface it in a nice way at a glance on your phone, on your watch and all that kind of stuff, right? So I think the app layer, I don't know, maybe it's I/O, like whatever it is, right? That will come where it incorporates I/O into the more daily motions of life. That's beyond just textual chat and voice chats, right? And also there's the memory question too, right? Because a lot of these chats are just one shot, right? Like you could have memory in ChatGPT. It doesn't have your entire life in it, right? And so how do you actually, do you want that, right? Do you want like an AI that actually knows everything about your life? It probably will help you, respond to emails and texts and all that, a little bit more intelligently. Or do you not want that and just want everything to have a fresh, state when it tries to attempt a problem? I don't know. Like I recently just heard someone told me like their friends were saying like your ChatGPT just always sounds like you because there's enough memory in it that it just colors its response.
Yeah.
And so sometimes maybe that's not a good thing. Like you actually want the real or the unvarnished ChatGPT. And yeah, so I think there's all these questions out there. Like are people looking for that universal, full memory, full reasoning AI to help with their lives and work, right? Personal and family. Or are they looking at more siloed, right? Like something that actually understands let's say all of my travel, right? And it's like the app is engineered only, for travel, and it's all the bells and whistles that it requires. Yeah.
Completely out of the box question, but are we training these models by actually using the models?
If you use the non-enterprise API versions, you are, or you're giving them consent to do that. Yeah.
And surely, this is, as far as like how much we're paying to use ChatGPT, whether it's $20 or $60.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the cost of running these queries that we're putting in, it costs more. But
Yeah,
the reason,
yeah,
right?
for sure. Yeah. So I think it's certainly a land grab. There's certainly you were helping them, build the models, doing some of the reinforcement learning.
Right.
But yeah, but I think people are generally, I mean, in the history of different models of how it works, right? The Ubers and the Lyfts, right? Like
Right.
maybe even the early days, the Amazon, right? Like so you it's okay to be losing money for a while as long as you're grabbing mind share and whatnot. And I would always say like kids these days, like ChatGPT is such a thing that like it's actually very hard to displace that. Even if you say like Gemini is there, like Google search, like Google to them is the search engine, right? And ChatGPT is how I do my homework, let's say. and even if you could go to Gemini and do the same thing, I think that the ChatGPT, which is not a very well engineered product name, but it just really stuck with people. Like,
Right.
so everybody is going to ChatGPT. If you're not using ChatGPT, people think like you should be using ChatGPT. Like, why are you on Claude or on Gemini or something?
That's
like,
true.
Where, like again, benchmarks are one thing, but I think the land grab, the perception, all of that is certainly what they got.
Yeah, I mean, I hear my nephews and nieces saying ChatGPT as opposed to Google it nowadays.
Yeah. I'm sure the Oxford Dictionary will incorporate it in some years.
Clement, let's go to the very beginning, right? So you had multiple startups. So I'd love to get a glimpse into that. Let's unpack the beginning. That founder journey. Before the founder journey, the engineer journey. So what's that transition from the engineer to the founder?
Yeah, I think there are, of course, engineers turned founders in the Valley. I feel maybe there's not enough of it. And I think that's probably because Google does a very good job at just, having people, I think this was something that people told me a while back was like one of the best things that Google did was how to figure out like to get engineers to work in their, in their problem space and spend like, 15, 20 years doing it. Because like that's how they make sure there's not a competitor competing with them, right? So I think, if anything, like I think my journey started at Google, right? Not unlike a lot of people. 2006, joined Google as an intern, then turned full time. But I never actually had like entrepreneurial aspirations, right? So I think
it's not in the family, like
it's not in the family.
Okay.
Yep, I grew up in an Asian family. Like they were actually against me joining Google. They were actually saying like you better off join Microsoft. I got offers from both.
Because at the time, Microsoft
Microsoft is a blue chip company, and Google might disappear tomorrow. But I interned at Google, and I wasn't considering the risk and all that. Like I was just saying, oh, California is great. Like weather is great. Like the team is great, solving like really wonderful problems. I remember like Peter Norvig was in the team. I think he's still there, and he's the author of my artificial intelligence textbook. So. Yeah, and I mean, many years later, VMware acquired my second company. So, like, I think VMware and Google started in the same year.
Right.
So Google is this cool kind of information retrieval, like, search company. VMware is an infrastructure company, right?
So when you were at Google, there was no idea that one day you were going to start this company and like be a founder one day. That was not a concept for you.
Yeah, I think I was just a really nerdy person. Like, I just like. I mean, at Google, it was like it's like Disneyland, right? It's the buffet, like it's everything. Like everything at Google is a single repo. Like all the documentation was open. At least I think it's still true back today. And so you could just be like talking to really interesting people, and I think back then, like even production services would not be blocked off from Teams. So you could suddenly call some service that you don't know, and it gives you this amazing, like let's say nearest neighbor service, or it gives you this amazing like browser emulation. I guess now it's back in vogue. Like all that kind of stuff. Like and you just be like, oh, I could just call this, and then you call it, and then you're using it, and you call the other team and be like, oh, I'm using it. Like this is in production. Sorry. So it was so fun. I think at that point, but it was just really nerdy stuff. And I think I got to go a little bit further back because I started, of course, doing programming and computer science at Rice in Houston. And I remember, like, to give you the contrast of how unlikely I would be an entrepreneur is I remember back then I would be, like, at my room, I'm doing CS and double major, and I would be coding and stuff. And my next-door neighbors would be having parties, and, like, there were people coming along. And I would just be staring at my screen. Like I just like completely disconnected from what's happening in the next room, and I would just be typing and coding and stuff. Like I'm that like nerdy of a guy, and yeah.
Before we sort of dive into the founding, that's interesting. I didn't quite expect us to dive into that, but that level of focus and attention to what you're doing, right? You're at university, everyone's partying and having fun, but you're there focused.
Yeah.
Where does that come from?
I don't know. I think it's an obsession. I think all of us have some OCD going on, and my parents certainly tell me I did have that as a kid. So I think just computers, like, you know, going even further back was like the first time you installed, for my generation, like Visual Basic, and putting it on Windows and be like, in File, there's a command called make.exe. And I'm like, oh, so that's how you make computer software. Because until that time, you're just saying, okay, well, you just, you know, you buy something or you got something and then it's .exe, right? And that's an app or that's a program. And then when you got that, then you'd be like, okay, this is how you make this is how you make a program. And so you start on that journey and then you're trying to learn, you know, Visual Basic and all that kind of stuff, right? And so I think that just, the act of making, right? I think this is something that is true universally. Like, you know, whether you're making art, whether you're making music, right? But making like something where it looks and feels and, you know, people can touch it and be like, whoa, this is really cool. Like that reverberates, right? And so I think, and then there's this, I think there is that obsession about like trying to solve something. Like you want to make something faster, you want to make something, you know, scale better, you want to make something just a little bit more performance sometimes, right? And it just, you know, sucks. Something is in your soul that you feel like, okay, I want to, you know, just eck out a little bit of performance. I don't like it failing like this. I don't like it, you know, spewing a error message. Yeah, so I think it is an obsession.
But that obsession and that, as you said, making something, has AI, and I'm slightly digressing here, but has AI somewhat taken that away from us? Like, especially for engineers and founders, we live in a world where our ability to create something and as you said, make something, it's going to be through prompting an AI to do it for you.
Yeah. Well, I think it's certainly leveled the playing field because a lot of people who don't necessarily have all the training to write code, right, they could do that with prompting. I think for a lot of engineers, right, I'm a big fan of the book Building Right It, right? And I think engineers tend to build it right, but not oftentimes build the right it. And I think the ability to have AI allows us to be like, okay, why don't we really figure out what is the right it?
Sure.
Because I have this problem still today, right, where I would just sit down and be like, oh, I really want to use this package, right? I really want to use this. I really want it to be refactored and look like this, right? Because there's just an obsession, right? And I would get, you know, an afternoon, you know, time not wasted, but you know, spent on it. But now if you like have the prompt layer on top of it, then you'd be like, okay, I don't really care at this point because I want to put something out there. I want to see like what people are thinking about it, right? And so I think currently in my current role, like I get a lot of chances to be like, okay, let me do like a week-long kind of spike and be like, okay, I'll build this. I don't really care if there are unit tests. Right now it does have like, because nowadays you can't really have an excuse for that. But yeah, but if it doesn't have all the right, vulnerability checks when you're checking in code, like that's okay, right? Even though it feels wrong, it feels like the coding style needs to have, spotless or check style running. Like you don't feel that you need that, but yeah, so just code away and do all of that. And then when you really figure out that there's some there, right? This is onto the right it. Then you may come back and be like, okay, I really need to come back and redo some of the core stuff, or you even just rewrite it and just now really put the mind to that motion.
So there's still an element of, or at least there is still a world of creativity where you could still make something in this.
Oh, I think so, for sure. I think to the degree that we have good APIs and good documentation because we want people to integrate with you. Like I think all the new stuff still needs to have all of those pieces in place. Like meaning people like to integrate with things that work well, right? And so I think there is a creative component to that, right? Because there's no right or wrong. I don't know how you even architect some of these APIs or documentation or UX or the flow and all that kind of stuff, right? So there's still that piece where it's at as low level as the API or as high level as like how your UX work. I think there's certainly creativity involved.
Clement, let's go back to the university story. So at what point was that inflection point? At what point did you know, whether it's the university journey or whether it's being at Google, at what point did you know I'm going to be a founder? I'm going to be, or at least start thinking about being part of a startup?
I think when I started in my first company, so I will rewind to my Google days. So at that point, a colleague of mine said, okay, there's, Sutter Hill is starting a new company. It's in the financial market space, and it's going to revolutionize, Fed funds, time deposits, repo. And I don't know anything about financial markets, let alone Fed funds or time deposits or all that.
Right.
But I just feel like, but you could build a new exchange. And you all like then the things just start to go in your mind and be like, okay, so exchange, like all the big exchanges I know are like mainframes, right? Like, right, okay, but you don't probably want to be coding on Tandem. So you'd be like, okay, so are we going to do this all in memory? Like, how are you going to do your transaction logs and stuff? Are you going to do it on database? So that was more of the obsession, I think. And then okay, so let's let me quit my Google job and do all that. And of course, there's a lot of thinking went into that. And I always go back to like two stories. One story is I told my SRE at that point at Google, I'm quitting, and he was like, oh, and I was like, oh, I'm joining a startup, and be like, oh, so you'll be back, you'll be back soon, and I was like, okay, and then I remember telling my director that I'm leaving, and she told me like, okay, if you want to come back, you got to give me 2 days. Because one day you can't come back the next day because HR doesn't work that way. So I'm like, okay, so there's like, to me, like there's no risk almost.
Like the job is guaranteed to come back to.
Yeah, of course you lose out, some of the upside of continuing to work at Google. But it just feels like, like there's this like really cool problem to solve. And I'm not even thinking like, is there a market, the TAM, like broad market? Wow. I'm not even thinking of any of that.
Were these even ideas in your mind? Like, did you think about like the business end of startups?
No. Like I think it just seemed like it was a really cool problem.
So it still goes back to the idea of obsession and making something.
Yeah.
Because, and not that I want to get personal, but you're building a house.
Yeah.
Right. It's again making something. Like everything is about that obsession to see something turn into something.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it is something universal.
Sure.
I mean, not to disparage like some professions, but like there are obviously some professions that are there that perhaps are more about supporting, right, or the currency in modern society. But there are many professions that are out there making food, making art, making music. I think I always think programming is very much close to more of an art form than to like a science, because you ask like 20 different people to do the same thing and they all have like a different. Well, you ask the same AI to do the same thing, like today and tomorrow, like it will probably give you a whole different architecture, right? So it's like, so what do you decide? Like, do you want to put it this way? Do you want to, is it going to be running on this architecture? Does it have this API? Does it have this flow? Right? So it's like a very creative process. So I think it is a universal thing where I think some people, certainly I think, or even most people, like if I give kind of a wand to my wife and she's not a coder, right, and says, okay, well, you could build anything you want, right? She always has a lot of ideas, right? Like it's whether it's for travel, whether it's for cooking, whether it's for like whatever it is,
right?
Like she has a lot of ideas, and I feel, I think this is universal. So for me, I think when I was at Google, like and even at school, like I really wanted to build something, and so the lure of building Exchange just seemed like I wanted to understand, like. I think that's one of the draws to leaving like a big company is you tend to specialize, right? Like in big companies, so you get visibility into just a very small, like your surface is just very limited in terms of like your inputs and outputs. But in a startup, like you're basically deciding the database, the front end, building the client, building the back end, building the office, right? How do you want the process to work? The code reviews and all that kind of stuff, right? And so I think it just. Yeah, just that I think then piqued my interest, right? I remember the first time going to the startup, like starting. I left Google on a Friday, joined the startup on Monday, and then we went and be like, oh, we need to go to Apple Store, right? Because you need to buy a laptop, right? So no IT, right? So nobody's giving you a laptop and setting up your desk. You go to Apple Store, and then we went back to the office, be like, oh, we now have 3 people, and it's not kind of easy to all be like looking at the same monitor. I guess we're not, we have big bodies. So we'd be like, okay, let's go to Staples and buy a projector, right? So then it but imagine that mindset, but it's like with coding and building stuff, right?
Sure.
Like you're like thinking like, what's the most scrappy way to build something, to test it, and it's everything is just.
But it's so much fun, right?
It's so much fun, right? And so, but of course, the reality of whether your things, the thing that you built, actually is, it has product market fit, right? The market is big enough. Eventually, will set in, right? So, so for us, I think we built the exchange, and 3 years later, I remember we were going to launch the exchanges for big banks, right? So like the Bank of America, Chase, I think like all the SocGen, like all the big banks had like letter of intent to say like they would trade on our platform,
Right.
and we said, okay, this is the go live date, so make sure it runs on your browser, right? All that kind of stuff, right? We were running on Flash, the front end, running in Internet Explorer on Flash. That's how long ago this was. And so they all got there, they got their logins, they set up all their centers, our currencies, all the credit lines, all kind of stuff, and I remember like my CEO was like, you, Clement, probably need to stay in Palo Alto in a hotel for the whole week because like trading starts around, I guess 5 over here. Just make sure you're ready in case you support the trades that happen.
Right.
And so I still have photos from those days, right? Because like Palo Alto downtown is nice at night. So I remember like waking up and be like, okay, now's the go live date. We're gonna have trades, and there were no trades. Like none at all. Like on the first day, and I think for the first week we had one trade. And for a product that was designed to replace voice brokers, the voice brokers would do a better job than us, certainly for one trade, and certainly less money to cost to have that infrastructure. So we actually thought it was the wrong thing to build.
Right.
So I think that is the moment then dawned on me. It was like, okay,
PMF settles in and you start thinking about the business side.
Right. And then be like, okay, so now we want to figure out this. So we all these letter of intent, right? Like it has a JP Morgan and stuff like that, right? Like, so like, isn't that going to be it, right? Like right? So it's just start like asking more questions. I know like business or execs, like, I mean, I'm a founding engineer, but like don't want to ask, just like I don't want somebody to ask me like, why are you using like MySQL? Like, why are you using like XA transactions with JBoss? Like, I don't want people to ask me a question and having to defend. But now I'm starting to ask more questions and be like, okay, like we built all of this, like why isn't it happening and all that, and we decided at that time, like, maybe this is the wrong thing to build. We thought, like, that's maybe the wrong market. Maybe the market doesn't exist and all that. And so I thought, going back to the story, like, I could pull my 2-day card back to Google and we could all go back to where we came from. Sutter Hill at that time said, no, let's just, you folks could build things. And so let's just write you a check and you could just continue to build whatever you want.
I didn't realize it was an SHV company.
The first one and second one, yeah, both.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so of course there are other rounds, but the seed funding for both my first and second company come from Sutter Hill. And
you were working out of their office, I assume.
So the first company we did work out of their office a little bit, only very briefly. I think we got a Regis office very soon. Like this is before WeWork, so the Regis office have no windows, so no bar or anything.
So
the second company worked out of the first company, because of the both Sutter Hill companies. So initially we worked out there. Eventually we moved again to another Regis location. But yeah, they said, okay, don't go back to Google. Right? We'll just give you some money and you could work out an idea together. But the first company, the CEO Glenn, bless his soul, like he just kept at it and it kept saying, like, eventually we'll figure this out. Eventually interest rates will pick up and these markets will heat up. And he continued to do that, right? Like we started the company in 2010, left in 2013, thinking again with my puny engineering mind that it's not going to fly or we built the wrong thing. Built it right, though. Built the wrong thing. But now it's $1 trillion a day exchange.
Wow.
So like we're getting checks from GLMX and like I hold it and I'm like, this is crazy. Like,
wow,
15 years later or 14 years later, like this, like there's a timing component to like product market fit, of course, that maybe it's more obvious in certain markets. But yeah, he just persevered. He hopefully replaced the Flash front end, and then now they're very successful as a company, and I think that speaks to equity, of course, right?
Sure.
Meaning if you own something, that will potentially pay out. But this is almost like a wild bet at that point, right,
Yeah.
of what it is, right? But I think the idea that, oh, well, there's like product market fit, like we do need to pay attention to the market, did bleed over then to the second company, which like we started to ideate and think about, okay, what do we really want to build? And I remember like every week we would just sit around and be like, okay, let's all like, come up with crazy ideas to try. And we did try them, right?
Sure.
So we're like, okay, maybe everybody would share their searches on Google. So we built like a Chrome plugin and be like, you see your social friends, like what they're searching for and what links they clicked on.
Right.
Maybe there's a little privacy intrusive, but we did that, and then we send it out to people. We build like kind of FanDuel and that kind of like real time betting market for sports, if you will. And we built it, and we actually had it run in like sports bars and whatnot, and so people could win stuff. So we tried that, and I am not a big sports fan. So after building it, and we were like, oh, let's go to like AT&T Park back then, AT&T Park, AT&T Park, and
Sure.
just went to AT&T Park, and I remember like using our app to play with it, and like I don't understand baseball that much, and the sun was really bright, and I'm always missing the questions because I'm not like not paying attention to the phone. The phone keeps on shutting off, and I went back and I was like, no, this is not for me. Like I'm sure there might be something, and I'm sure like we discovered like DraftKings and FanDuels are things, but it was not for us, and then Wavefront, which is my second company, kind of came to be because when I left Google and I went to my first company, at Google, like I had a lot of obsession about like how Google manages their production infrastructure, right? So there's Borg and there's Borgman back then at Google. And when I left Google, there's no Borgman, there's no Borg, right? Because we're racking stuff in Equinix. So I said, okay, well, there must be like a better thing. And people say, okay, well, there's Splunk. Splunk nowadays is a lot more advanced than Splunk back then. But Splunk is this log thing. So I'd be like, okay, well, I could do logs everywhere. And it's very slow. It's very expensive. It's on-prem. So you're like getting a license, but not really like you need a license to use your thing, to use your disk space. So we're like, no, like there must be a better thing, and Google has that better thing, and Google's not going to open source Borg and Borgman, not even today. I guess Kubernetes came out of that. But so we said, okay, let's look at whether Borgman or any other things in Google back then would be interesting things to build. And at the same time, I think Sam Pilara came out of Twitter as their chief architect, and he also joined Sutter Hill. And he kind of met with us, and he said, you need to build Viz, which was kind of the people who left Google, went to Twitter, and said, okay, we need Borgman to actually slay the fail whale. And he said, look, that's the thing that's slayed the fail whale. And so if you build this and then become a SaaS platform, then a lot of people will probably want that. And so I think both of those things came together, and we started to build that. Yeah. Oh, there's a side note as well. We also met Ben and Thierry from Snowflake, like when they were just two founders. And I remember we were sitting together at the GLMX office because we were still thinking about what we would build, but we were working out of the GLMX office, and they came in and says, okay, we're going to build this company, Snowflake, and it's going to be a data warehouse in the cloud and all that kind of stuff. And we may join forces together and go do that. And well, of course we didn't. And at that time, we sat down, kind of the GLMX engineering crew kind of sat down and be like, I don't think like P&G or like Tide or all these companies are going to like move their data warehouse to the cloud, right? At that time, we were still just in that early journey to the cloud. And so we thought that wouldn't quite work, but obviously they proved us very wrong.
Yeah.
But hey, we then started to do Wavefront. They started to do Snowflake. Snowflake became a Wavefront customer, right? And we do a little bit of Snowflake as well. But yeah, so I think it kind of turned out well. But but there was this small anecdote story there. Like if we decided another way, then we would have a very different conversation as to what transpired. Afterwards. Yeah.
That's so fascinating. So when you think about the Wavefront story, right? At that point, it wasn't just an obsession anymore. You were thinking about the business side of things. You were thinking about figuring out whether what you're building has legs.
Yep.
What does that journey look like in the beginning? Are you speaking to customers? Are you doing a lot of fact finding? Or do you just go in and build and let be more of a product-led growth and see if it works out? Like, what is that?
Yeah,
how did it look Wavefront?
I think we're still a very much engineer-focused kind of company, so we don't I don't think we had our first product manager until much later. So, of course, Dev, our CTO, my co-founder, like he is amazing in terms of bridging the technical and the product and the use case and all of that. So he's kind of the face of the company as we go visit Yammer, right? Visit Workday, visit Box, right? He would be able to kind of sell the vision and Borgman and Viz and all that. So I actually, for a very long period of time, even at Wavefront, was kind of just I get the field reports and be like, okay, they were looking for this. If we have this, then they will buy this and they will sign this and blah blah blah. And so I'll be like, okay, cool, and be like, oh, the next renewal comes and they want it to be cheaper. I'd be like, okay, so we need to get the margins to be like this and blah blah blah. And I'd be like, okay, so let's actually work on like the margins and so I would still think I was more. Because that's still not the exact thing that I mean. They're not giving me the spec of how to make it better. It's more like this is the customer's problem, right? Is either too expensive sometimes, right, or it's not fast enough, or they want to scale 10 times the traffic, and Clement, like, do you want 10 times the traffic? Didn't you take it, right? And so all of that is just kind of that kind of product or almost business requirements that lands on my lap, and then I just think about like, okay, so how is this going to work? How is this going to be translated into code? But then over time, I think as the company grew, right, we have Dev, and it goes to all of the companies, right? But there are going to be cases where he can't cover all of them, and I think at that point I think also Sam kind of like, okay, we got to give you a title, and then you could just like you could go to talk to the companies, and I was like, all right, like if you think that's a good idea, then I think that's where. Because again, going back to my university days where I'm just this person like that stares at a computer screen, like don't even turn my head. Then I think entrepreneurship like really, kind of force you to become a different person because like getting out of your comfort zone, and then you'll realize actually you have rapport, right? Because a lot of your customers are engineers, right? So they rather just talk to somebody. I remember like when I was visiting many places, right, including like the Workdays, like the PayPals, the Reddit, the Lyft, right? You're talking to engineers, right? So they rather, you tell them like, hey, this is actually really hard to do when you say you want this, and I could explain to them like why this is really hard because we store the data this way, and so if you want to do it this way, then if you want this particular feature to work, like this is actually really hard. But we could. I'm almost like ideating with them like live over there and be like, yeah, we'll be able to do that, and so people like get a sense like you're not just BSing, right, when you say oh we'll do this in the next release if you sign when you sign this for the next year. So I think that kind of feed into itself, right? I had many bad. Not bad, but like not ideal customer meetings where I just go like way into the weeds on like a very technical issue. But I think I think they're because so many of these companies are engineer led, and we're building a DevOps product, if you will, or engineer R&D product. Like I think just having myself out there was helpful, and I think that helped me kind of realize my gaps, right? Like how I could be a better communicator, right? More compassionate usually to people's problems, and so I think at Wavefront is where I slowly kind of I think grew out of my shell, if you will.
As far as Wavefront is concerned, and the role you were playing there, speaking to customers, I'm assuming they were design partners and they were giving you the feedback and you were iterating. But how do you know which feedback is great feedback that you need to do something about, and when it's quite siloed to that one customer and perhaps might not be the right feedback?
Yeah, I think. Well, I wouldn't say I'm also very good at it either, because oftentimes, like as an engineer, like I'm at a customer site and they show me like a very slow query, and I'm like, oh crap, like I don't like this. I don't like it slow.
Right.
And honestly, like maybe it's only for
but that's your obsession side.
Yeah,
right?
but that's I'm like, no, I'm gonna make it fast. I'm gonna make the query fast, and I'm just gonna go back and I'm gonna think about it, and I think, but I think that having said that, there are many of these cases where you just made something fast. There are, if it is slow enough that somebody's complaining to you, maybe only 1 out of 10, of your users is actually complaining to you.
Sure.
Because you happen to visit them, maybe, or because you happen to like serve the 1 to 10, like, the score, the NPS score. So you kind of know that because you gather that information. But if you actually make it better, like people actually notice these things, right? And engineers are really bad at giving feedback too. Like they expect the thing to work, and if it's better, like be like, cool, yeah, nice. Yeah, I'm not gonna come back and congratulate and be like, oh, nice, like this is like 10 seconds now. It's like when they're never gonna do that. So, so I think it just fed into that flywheel. So I wouldn't say I'm very good at that, but I think ultimately, like you, of course, like you're if you're doing kind of either customer collected feedback and working from that, or maybe from the other angle is like you're just deep diving into your own infrastructure and seeing like where things are spending time, right? So both of those like probably are informing your understanding of your infrastructure and where things are spending a lot of CPU cycles or disk IO. And you're just optimizing that, and maybe both of those come together, and you realize, okay, this is like what I want to do today, and just make this better. And lo and behold, like some customers get really happy, and so, like honestly, like I remember like back after we got acquired by VMware, Wavefront got acquired by VMware, like I did some of the automated schema management stuff to basically reshape the data adaptively based on the incoming data source and to accelerate essentially query execution speeds. And the PM actually went out to, I believe, one of the customers, I forgot who they were, and they came back and be like, whatever you did in the last quarter, right? Like all the features don't matter. Like it was like this thing that just made everything fast.
Wow.
And it just like that's the thing. Like they didn't ask for that, right? But it was like that's the thing. And my PM was like, yeah, you do whatever you want. Like, yeah, because of course, like of course there are other features that matter. But he says like, but the customer like really noticed, like, because once something is like, I think Paul Graham said that, right? When something is like 10 times better, like people notice, right? So if your latency, all the tail latencies, like you could like bring that up by 10 times and people will notice that. And at the end of the day, I think we spend, well, depending on the product, but I think we don't spend enough time, like probably industry-wide, to think about those frustration points and just, accelerate latency or accelerate like cost or like reduce cost, meaning. And just do, and because customers will notice, they won't ask you oftentimes, but you do that and people will be like, wow.
It kind of makes me think, right? So when you think about the customers and the ones you worked with at Wavefront, what did they care about the most? Was it the UI, how it all looked? Was it the speed, the latency? Was it the another feature? Like, is less more? Less features, but they do better. Like, what were the key things that you could think of?
Yeah, I think interestingly, maybe similar to Google. Google has the search bar that's has nothing else, right? But when all the other things have a portal, right? Like the request that we get the most from Wavefront was, give me the blank page. Like, don't even show me graphs or anything. Like, just let me type. Like, just let me type the query, and then I just want to do these deep dive explorations.
Right.
So, yeah. So I think there are some similar themes to that where, if you're working with well, I guess Google's not with technical people, but like technical audience, but like just in general, you give people the feeling that they're
in control.
Yeah, they're in control. There's like just this vast engine behind you
It's
that
crazy.
could give you, maybe even that feels like ChatGPT too, right? Like
what I was thinking about that, I was thinking like when I look at Google or ChatGPT, it just, so what do you want to do today? Kind of question.
Yeah.
And you just type.
Yep.
Simple.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not forcing you to like fit your question or your problem into like some drag and drop or some like pipelining thing, right? You just like sit there and be like, okay, let me start typing, and you start typing, and this like iteration process, like chat, of course, conversational process. But I think there's like it's a smell, right? I think with product design, where generally like you want people to have this feeling of this immense power, this immense possibility. Sure. Right, and I think for Wavefront we have that, and people just they didn't. I don't think all of them used that power before they bought it. But the fact that not me, but our sales folks and dev mostly like demonstrated that power, they'd be like, oh, this is cool. Like, so that means like if someday I need this to do this and that and this and that and all that, like this platform will be able to do that. Like I didn't just told you everything that is possible and it just checked all your boxes. There are like many boxes that potentially in the future you could be using the platform for. And I think that was the thing that I think unlocked a lot of customers. And of course the scale, right? Of course the cost.
Yeah. One last question I want to ask you about Wavefront, and then I'd like to dive into your journey since Wavefront, since the acquisition, being an investor, being an advisor. But the last question I wanted to ask you about Wavefront. So, Clement, if you were to rebuild Wavefront today with AI native tools, what would you do differently?
I think these days, like, there are a lot of open source tooling and observability. So I would definitely build it open source, or I would say open core. So you would want people to understand, because beyond what I just said about maybe that the sense of power, the scalability, the cost, all of that, people do want these days to understand, like, you don't own all of their data, and there's no way for
Yep.
you. There's not that you can't just send all the data back, but they would need a ginormous amount of infrastructure to catch it, right? So or you just egress all of your kind of bits and tell them how to interpret them. But people actually want to understand, like, hey, even though you're a SaaS platform and an observability platform, like, you actually don't own the data in a particular form that they can't really get back. So if I were to build it today, like, I would probably build it open core, run it as a SaaS service, right? So we could be the best person to run it, right, at the lowest cost possible. Like, you don't have to think about HA, high availability. You have somebody to call if your queries are slow. You have integration problems. You could call someone to support or all that. But also understanding that at some point, if you were to run in an air gap situation, or you want to run it locally, you want to run it if you want to try it, right, that you could run it locally. And if the SaaS platform is any good, then at least we could demonstrate to you that, hey, we could in fact run it better than you, because we probably know the code base better than you do.
Right.
But I would that feeling, I think it is starting to shift, where people feel like, hey, it's better if we own the data, right, in observability especially, and maybe you're indexed in some way, and you're able to still have the same power. But if I were able to look at the data myself, I have the ability to do that. I actually have the data in my possession. I think that'd be my technical answer to how I would build it differently. I don't know if
Right.
that's yeah.
It is definitely, I guess, the concern in the market right now is the sharing of this data.
Right.
And there are companies that are finding new ways to solve that problem.
Yep.
With that in consideration, shifting to you being an investor, you being an advisor, since the acquisition of Wavefront, which is a phenomenal success, you've been, you had so much successes, especially, starting off at a company like Google and having multiple startups. Now you're an SHV, sorry, a ER at SHV, again, SHV powerhouse. Like, you're keeping that staying with the same family, which is incredible, because I know how amazing they are. But before you start this journey again, thinking about starting your next company, you've been investing, you've been advising. As an advisor and as an investor, what are you seeing? What gets you most excited? What are the sort of ideas and problem statements that you're seeing in the market today that gets you really excited to write a check?
That's a great question, because I think as an angel investor, after the Wavefront story, I didn't sit down because I guess most funds would have like a mandate or a thesis or something, right? I didn't have that. So I sat down and people started coming, right? Like, because they need a seed check and all that. And so it was like more of like friends of friends, right? Like, so you meet with them, and then you'd be like, okay, is this a good idea? Does it feel right? Like,
Sure.
know kind of what their backgrounds are and whatnot. And I would go, and I did that for a couple of months, hopefully maybe years, maybe too long. And Sam kind of one day told me, like, he just told me point blank, Sam being from Sutter Hill, managing director, like he said,
Sam Pilar.
Yeah. And he said, Clement, you'd be like a really bad VC, because you're really good at coding. So if somebody tell you there's a problem, you'd be like, okay, well, this is like how you would solve it, right? Like, this is like blah, 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 blah. Okay, then you would do that. Maybe that's the wrong answer. So, but like, you would, in your mind, think, okay, this is the steps you would take
Sure.
to solve the problem. And so be like, okay, so you need $100K to do that? Oh, cool, nice. Like, that's a real problem. I think you could solve it, and then you could write a check. And then Sam would tell me, but then a year later, you would go visit the company and be like, they did nothing like that. They may have pivoted already.
Sure.
Or if they're still in the same problem, you would discover that, oh, you did that, and right. That happens even at big companies, right? Like, I'm at VMware.
So you're making a great advisor.
I'd probably be a better advisor than investor, yes, because I think I would misjudge the ability, because you have no control. Like, you're not going to be there, like, and just saying, like, hey, do this, or look into this piece of technology, go to this cloud, and oh no, like, we've tried this, like that. I like maybe personally, or other folks have tried this, like, that doesn't smell right and all that. So I think I realized, okay, maybe I should I should like step back a little bit from the directly investing at companies route. And so I'm an LP in a number of funds, so at least I could, and those GPs are kind enough to, bring me in, and also like here and there would be like, Clement, can you like vet this? And I could actually go vet this, right? Instead of just, believing in usually a deck, right? Or a coffee meeting, and then you wire the money and then you don't hear back from them like ever. Yeah. So, so advising, I think it has been a lot better. I think, of course, you take equity as well, so you get something, you get some skin in the game, and you're not out a bunch of cash, so maybe that's a little bit more risk adjusted. But then people actually want you because they thought you were of some help to them, right? So in some way, right? Maybe it's technical, maybe it's hiring, maybe it's like strategy.
The name itself holds weight, right? If I'm a founder and I have, you've invested in my company, it's having your name on the cap table looks good in front of other potential investors, even customers, maybe.
Yeah. So there are certainly many advisor deals that it's just to get my face on their webpage. So like beyond, but a lot of it was just to get my face on their webpage. But the rest of it was to talk about potential customers or helping them think through like is that the right architecture and whatnot. But I think advising then. People feel like, okay, well, I'm giving you equity, so let me actually get you on a call like every month or so, and we could talk about something, maybe something that I saw, maybe a competitor, and I would be like, okay, what do you think about that? Like, have you considered that? And and if I need to make an intro, right, to a VC that I could, right, I could be of help. Right?
Sure.
So I think that it seems a little bit more aligned. So investing through LPs and advising directly, you're getting equity, and then actually. I enjoy that better too, right? Because I get to see so many things, right? Like, oh, you're building insurance products, or you're building observability, right? Verticalized observability for different silos, right? Or I've invested like in restaurants and stuff as well. So like, but it helps. Like, I've invested advice for those. So I have like, oh, okay, cool. Like because, I've been in the enterprise SaaS business for a long time, right? So I don't get to be exposed to so many other industries, and so just helping me understand like, oh, this is the cost lever there. This is what people are looking for, if nothing else, just for my intellectual curiosity. But it's that's the same thing as like making things you want to be.
That's
understand stuff.
It kind of in many ways you got me thinking, right? As a founder, you being a serial entrepreneur, you've had exits, you've had successes. And you are thinking, right, what's next? But I have an opportunity to invest now. I have this newfound wealth I can do something with. Do you find that perhaps from your experience, being an LP first before going out on your own and deciding where you put the money might be a good way to see how that particular fund is investing and supporting them with advising them on where to, doing the due diligence, basically?
I don't know. Oh, well, for the funds that are investing in as LPs, like it's back to the I'm trusting the person situation again. Because of course I could look at their thesis, I could look at their past funds and performance and all that. But I think at the end of the day, like past performance are not indicative of future returns, right? And so it is also in some sense like a venture investment, right? So I think you got to make sure like in your portfolio, like it's not like 50% of your net worth is in that, right? Like you want to limit your exposure there because you don't want to be like just woken up all the time when the interest rate changes and it affects your portfolio in very wild swings. So I think but I'm interested to know what the GP is seeing, right? Because they give me a lot of insights, right? As an LP investing, and they'd be like, okay, these are the deals that I'm seeing. So most of the funds that I'm investing in, they're in a space that I am interested in, right? So like probably software.
You believe in their theses, you like what they're doing.
Right. Yeah. But then I could also say, okay, well, what are some interesting things that you recently saw, right? And then they'll tell me and be like, oh, that's cool, right? So are they open source? So I could go tinker with that.
Sure.
Or I could talk to the founders. And at the very least, I could be like, okay, you're investing in it, then I could use it. Like I use cal.com.
Sure.
So because we're, investing through a fund, so let's go use it and maybe give some feedback, but otherwise just at least don't support their competitor in a weird way. So
it's interesting. Like for me as an LP in a couple of funds, I get to see the statements and I get to see how they're performing and where the money's being spent. I guess that's where I was thinking of, because it gives you some sort of perspective, even though you are trusting this fund manager to do the investment. One last question I have regarding investing and advising, right? When you look at what's happening right now in AI, with this AI era that we're in, is it more about engineering or is it more storytelling?
Well, I think it really depends on the company, I would say, right? Because if you're building, perhaps, let's say if you're solving like a pain point, like for a customer, let's say a B2C or B2B customer,
Sure.
then you have to be able to sell the story, right? Just the fact that you have AI and you could chat with something like doesn't like some companies just slapped AI on that so you could chat against all of your, let's say, your tickets or your bugs
Sure.
and stuff like that. Okay, that's kind of nice, but that's like not what what's the story, like, because every day I can't find my tickets, so I need an AI to chat with so I could find my tickets. I don't know, right? But in many cases, like, I think, if you could tell a story, like, oh, we could give this AI, it helps you, again, you use a ticket example. Oh, maybe you could free up all your support staff, so they're actually working on, like, the most important tickets or, like, the most VIP customers, and the rest of it, like, they could do, like, first layer triaging and all that. And all of that means, like, your customer, like, gets happier, they get instant. Like, at least, Amazon's, like, Amazon had this chatbot a long time ago before even LLMs came in, right?
Yeah.
And I just feel like, oh, I don't have to talk to a person. Like, that person could do a click and be like, okay, it's done, right? It's either they figure out it's a refund or they need to do something about the order. Like, it's nice, right? Like, so if you could sell that feeling to people and be like, okay, this could be your product, like this could be the support experience. People don't have to feel like they're, they have to, talk to someone that doesn't get it or be transferred like 20 times and every time they lose context. I think that's helpful. But I think on the engineering front, right, then that's the question becomes like, how do you use AI to actually build IP,
Right.
right? And I think that's still, and I find that to be very true today, where you can have a good, solid chat with AI or do a deep research or something, right? Or Claude and like pull in all of the project knowledge and come up with it with an understanding of something that you did not know before. Oh yeah, there was some research that is in this space that I am not aware of at all, and it's able to surface that and have chat and be like, okay, so how does that work? Like, what is the core idea there? How does that compare to what I know already? And be like, okay, so if I want to know more about this, like, can you tell me? So I think there is this, kind of research partner that is already there, right? And it may not write the code properly in some of these cases, but at least it will give you, because we talk about hallucinations and wrong stuff getting spewed out all the time, but I feel the researchy side of it is actually quite good. Because all these LMs are trained on all the papers and all that, right? And they could search and these things are readily available. But I find like my hallucinations is more about asking like, where is the World Expo? And it somehow like still today could hallucinate and just say, oh, it's in like Tokyo this year and be like, no, that's not. But with research stuff, like it oftentimes will get it and I'll have a conversation. It will not just tell me about an algorithm that did not exist or tell me something completely gibberish as to why the algorithm works and the reason behind it and the proofs and all that. Like it will be able to do that. So it's it's also probably because most of the models are tuned to like all these math Olympiads and research oriented questions, right? So
You're absolutely right. I think the research side is definitely strong. I mean, I as you said at the start, I find myself talking to it in the car, just having a conversation.
Yeah.
But the reason I asked that question around the engineering and the storytelling, I just think about Amazon's Alexa and Apple's Siri, and then OpenAI's ChatGPT. Was the engineering just not there with Alexa and Siri, and they were probably first to the market in a way, but they failed? Or was it the timing wasn't right? It's like the timing of ChatGPT was just perfect.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, I think chat interfaces have been around for quite some time. So if you tell me, like, if ChatGPT were 10 years, like, earlier, like, if it came in 2012 or something, right? Like, I think it would still blow up in the same way, I think.
Right.
It would certainly, like, basically mean that nobody would use Siri or even invent it. Because everybody would be like, okay, why would you do it that way? I'm just surprised, though, that having ChatGPT around for so long, like, even the entrenched players is still catching up, right? We were talking about 3 years in, right? And I'm using Siri, and I think I was asking it just a very simple translate question.
Just didn't get it.
Like on my watch and be like, I can't do this. And I'm like, wow, like you...
Crazy.
right? And I think Google is a little better. Like Google Assistant, I think is a little better. Alexa, I think that's still, I haven't used it in a while, so I shouldn't comment. But it still goes to show like just how like a new player, like in this age, just like in the internet age, right? Maybe in the cloud age, like you have this ability to like just display something, right? Google obviously is very concerned, like people are not doing searches, because like, me and my wife, like we like everything is like ChatGPT now, right? Like it's like Google like caught up by having the search AI previews and stuff like that in today, but like it lost the mindset, it lost that the zeitgeist. It's like it's not in there anymore, and so people just be like, okay, I'm just gonna go to ChatGPT, and I'm gonna have a chat with it, and I could have follow up questions and all that, and so yeah, I really don't know actually. Honestly, like what is holding these assistants back? Like, is it there's a legal problem? Is there like there's a correctness problem? Like, of course you could just say, I almost feel like, yeah, you could just say like it makes mistakes. It's not like it doesn't make mistakes today. So like, so why don't you just like open up the floodgates to like 1% of people and just be like, let's see like if people really get super angry or do they just, oh, okay, like maybe I won't need ChatGPT today because I could ask my watch or I could ask my Nest Hub or something, right?
I mean, just like you, I mean, you may have, but I have never used Alexa. But Siri, I just always switched it off. Like every time I got a new phone, I just switched it off because I just found it so annoying. Yeah. I'm having a conversation, I'll just accidentally say something. It was just it'll think I'm talking to it.
Yeah,
and I think based on that, I kind of see it as, is it a possibility that the engineering just wasn't there, but the storytelling was great? Like they sold the idea with Siri.
Yeah, I think I use Siri. So the reason is because I have a newborn child. So I realized for the very first time, like I have no hands to control any of my devices. And so I actually went ahead and learned how to use Siri properly because there's like the shortcuts app, and you could actually build like really weird like way to build like procedural logic.
Right.
And sometimes because I just don't want to say so many things when I need to log a diaper or something. So I'd be like, okay, let me just program shortcuts. So I learned how to use it. It's very clunky, but it works. And of course, they're still asking like, why can't? Because there's a natural language solution to all of this, but they don't have it. So I think it does. Yeah, there is a story there. Like it does help with quality of life, but I feel like I don't know, right? And I guess that's why Apple is trying to figure out like what that means. I think Apple is uniquely difficult because they have the privacy mandate or the privacy claim. So how are you actually going to do that, right? Because the most powerful models are in the cloud, and the on-device models are not going to be as good. And this is the legacy problem, right? Like they probably have APIs into all these apps, right, in this weird way. And are we going to just like expose all of it to the model? And does the model know what to do? And if it does something very wrong, like order stuff from Uber or DoorDash, or like how are you going to like unwind all of that, right? Maybe some of them are not as easy as just like because you said something. So obviously we'll order your pizza. But now if it's just thinking you want a pizza and then ordered a pizza, then who is responsible, right? And how do you unwind all that, right? So maybe there's some of it there going on. But again, I just feel like at this stage, like because you're either in the zeitgeist or you're not, like and they're not, right? So like why not bet the farm? Why not bet the farm on it, right? I mean, you're turning it off already, so it's that, or you have maybe some users that will not turn it off, and the users that got annoyed get turned it off, right? Yeah.
I think now you could talk to it through. So you talk to Siri, but you can use ChatGPT. So it would say, I would tell it to play a song or something, and it would say, "Should I use ChatGPT to like?" I'm asking it to do something, and it would say, "Should I use ChatGPT?"
Right. But I think that's like doing a search. It's not like if you're controlling your phone.
Right.
Yeah. So I think it's not like if it's integrated in your calendar, like you want to like, okay, I would love it to have a time and be like, okay, can you clear my day for tomorrow?
Yes.
Like I'm sick today, like clear my day.
Yeah.
That'd be nice.
Send an email to everyone.
Yeah, email to decline. Right. Like, that'd be nice, but
that's pretty cool. Right? Actually. Yeah. That's a great business idea.
I think Claude is pretty close to that. If you connect everything. Yeah.
Clement, it's been really awesome having you on the show. I'd like to always finish off these episodes by asking a question. I mean, this whole show is about learning. Inside Silicon Mind is about getting the mind of individuals who are in Silicon Valley, or even if they're not in Silicon Valley, but they built companies, technology companies, software companies, and now AI companies. But as far as like learning and developing and expanding our minds, one thing I'm quite avid about is reading, and I always love a good book in my hands. I'm not a fan of audibles. I like to buy the book and read it. But to our viewers and listeners, is there a book that you've read, one that's truly resonated with you, that you feel has had a impact on your career, on it could be your career, it could be on how you think about technology, AI, one that has truly been quite profound for you?
Okay, well, so I think if you go back to my career, I would go back to the book The Right It, Alberto Savoya's book. I think that as an engineer, I wanted to understand why things fail,
Right.
like fail to take off and all of that, and because I think just as an engineer, you spend so much time thinking about like, yeah, everything like line spaces, tab spaces, like how do you align the code? How do you, is it passive voice? Does it like all that kind of stuff like you do? But if it doesn't work, right? If nobody uses it, then it's just a theoretical exercise that you just did and wasted all of your time. So I think that book really gave me the framework to think about like, yes, if I'm an engineer, I want to build it right, but like what is the right it to build? And I think that, you know, I think Alberto Savoia was a VP of engineering at Google, and so like he has that kind of engineering mindset. So he understood like how frustrating it is to spend so much of your life building something, and Google has a lot of those things going on, like building so much and then getting and then not getting traction and all that. So like, asking the right questions and you know, doing experiments and, you know, iterating and getting data quickly, cheaply, easily, all that. Yeah. So I think that book has shaped me immensely. I think to the degree that, you know, after Wavefront, as I actually built an ed tech company with generative AI with my sister, and I think that helped me like really try to figure out like, hey, what is the it in that space, because I have no idea. Like I have not been in the education space, right? Not in early childhood education for sure. And so I think that helped me to kind of, you know, ask the questions, like design the experiments, or at least design, you know, how do we want the first, you know, versions of the app to look like and feel like? What are the in-person testing that we could do? And I think that helped inform me a lot on that. Yeah.
What, when you think about that book, what was it specifically about it? Like what was it really teaching you?
I think it's really saying that at the end of the day, nothing really speaks success apart from somebody actually using it and paying for it. It seems like very cliche, but but I think there's a lot of cases where, okay, you could do a study, you could do a market study, or you could do like a research. You could ask, like, I'm sure like all the consulting companies can give you like, okay, if you do this, like that, you know, that you get a lot of people, right? Well, a lot of users. Or you'd be like, okay, we could like spend all these time and effort, right, to build, you know, the final shiny thing, because people will say that, right, like, oh, it needs to be perfect before, like, you know, before people will use it. But that book is arguing like for the complete opposite. Is like, oh no, like you know, use the minimal amount of effort, minimal amount of code, or, you know, whatever. And then you design these experiments. There's one story in there that always like resonates with me, which is like when IBM built speech recognition back in, I guess, in the 70s, which became IBM Via Voice. It's before all these like text to speech, speech to text stuff that we have on the phone, which now works perfectly. They thought about building it, and before they built it, they wanted to understand like whether people would pay for it and how people would use it. So they just set it up in a room where there's the computer there, and they just invite people there and be like, okay, there's now a computer that could just transcribe your voice. And people would just sit there and be like, oh, nice, like I could talk and, oh, what's up here on the screen? And of course, there's just a typist in the next room, right, typing. And so people would get this feeling that they have this technology.
Oh, wow. So they haven't built it yet.
They haven't built it yet, yeah. And then they very quickly realized people would not dictate their emails, because then your entire office would know what you're telling, you know.
Right, that's true. That's very true.
Still nowadays, right? Like we don't dictate our emails in our offices, right? And then they'll be like, okay, this is nice. Okay, so what would happen? Like, oh, good secretaries may not have to work, and all that kind of stuff. Right? But it starts to ideate. Like it starts to like people would start to think like, okay, this is how much I would pay for it. Like, oh, if I have this, like, would you pay for it? Would you pay for it now?
Right.
And then you could test like, okay, this is like why people would want something or not want something. So I think that really stuck with me, which is like, okay, because as an engineer, like, you know, you totally could get me to be like, let's build that thing, right? That's so cool. That's like speech recognition, right? But I think no, like you need to figure out like how people would use it, what people would pay for it, who would pay for it, and all of that. And then you really could understand, like, okay, the product should be built in a particular way. So I think that really
That's
helped
a
me.
great story.
Yeah.
The IBM story. That's interesting.
Yep.
Thank you for the recommendation. That's a great book. And as far as, books are concerned, do you read a lot, or is it?
I do.
Yeah.
You said no Audible, but I am a big Audible fan.
Oh, you are? Okay.
So in the car, it's either ChatGPT or Audible.
Okay.
Or a podcast, I guess. Yeah. So
What sort of Audible do you tend to listen to in the car?
it's nonfiction.
Nonfiction.
For sure. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Well, Clement, it was a pleasure, honestly. Thank you so much for making the time
it's a pleasure.
to see me here today and record this episode with me. I've had a lot of fun, a lot of learns. And obviously, I wish you all the best of luck on your next big journey.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was really fun.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Clement.
Thanks.
This podcast was brought to you by Serrano Labs and powered by Harrison Clark. At Harrison Clark, we're at the heart of Silicon Valley's evolution and at the intersection of search and venture, funding the companies shaping the future and connecting them to the most elite cloud, data, and AI talent. To learn more, visit harrisonclark.com. If today's episode challenged your thinking, then share it with someone who's driving innovation. For even more insights on achieving product market fit, subscribe to our newsletter, the PMF Playbook, where we break down the journey from zero to product market fit. Visit thepmfplaybook.com. For more episodes, follow us on social media or visit insidethesiliconmind.com. Until next time, stay curious, stay consistent, and stay inside the Silicon Mind. See you soon.